Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
I'm Sylvia Earle. I'm an oceanographer, National Geographic explorer, founder of Mission Blue, and I am an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for sponsoring this program.
And this is our show Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. We're glad that everyone is back and hope you've made some time to get outdoors. You can put your questions into the Q&A box, and we will get through as many of them as we can towards the end of the program. And we should be posting some links in the chat in the meantime for your information. And before we get started, we want to remind everyone that the world
Is
blue. And today we are incredibly honored and grateful to have journalist and New York Times bestselling author Susan Casey joining us. Susan's books include Voices. Oh, what do we get? Which road are you going to go in here? Voices of the Ocean. The
and
Devil's Teeth. Where is it?
ta-da!
And The Wave. Get that up here. Swooping in. Oh my God. And most recently, The Underworld.
Yes.
Welcome, Susan.
Hi, great to be here.
So good to see you.
We have yet to
Likewise.
fix it. Susan, when are we going to fix that?
What's that, Sylvia?
When are we actually going to go diving together?
You name it, anytime,
All right.
anytime.
It's overdue.
It certainly is. It's always a good day to go diving, especially with you.
All right, you're on.
So we really wanted to, we're not going to go here. I'm going to go start from the beginning if I can. Slideshow. There we go. Hooray.
We could wait till it's a little bit calmer than it is.
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the work that you did in bringing kind of attention to the waves. I mean, it's just so many people get out in the ocean and they just kind of see it from the shore, and they really don't understand what a dynamic environment it is. Particularly out in the open ocean, that it can just be incredibly robust like this. This robust weather.
Yeah, robust to say the least. I became really interested in this because I started hearing and reading about ships that were going missing. And in a time when the climate's in flux and storms are getting stronger, it became really clear that there wasn't really a scientific explanation for some of the conditions that were literally snapping large ships like freighters, like the one on the slide, snapping them in two. And often the ships wouldn't even have a chance to send an emergency signal, and they would just vanish. And I remember reading that in the New York Times and like at the end of the 90s and thinking, what do you mean? Yeah, I think they said it was like 2 ships per week were going missing. And later I did a bunch of reporting and went to Lloyd's of London, which insures a lot of the global shipping fleet, and found out that it wasn't quite that many, but it was still a lot, like one per month. And to me, that just seemed extraordinary. And so, like all the ocean subjects that I'm interested in writing about, it always begins with the question like, wait a minute. Like, what do you mean these ships are there was no scientific explanation for the ocean at its most ferocious. And in some seas, there were waves that were appearing that were like 3, 4, 5 times the size of the seas around them, and there was no explanation for that. So scientists had just basically said, I don't think they really exist. And the problem with meeting waves like this is you might not be around to explain what happened afterwards.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because we've seen some reports where a wave suddenly can appear that's the height of a 4 or 5 story building.
Yeah.
And it's just upon you. And then, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take
And they would have the equations for oil rigs and naval architects and such would be like, okay, we're going to make this strong enough to meet the 100-year wave. But the 100-year wave was showing up 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And that was really a problem.
Yeah.
I love this picture. Wow. How did they get the picture and survive?
That's a good question. I mean,
That looks like a sinker.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that I discovered why they were sinking was the waves were breaking on top of the ships, and they're flat, these big tanker ships, and they have hatches that they put their cargo in. Let's say it's like grain or oil or whatever it is, and those hatch covers would not be able to withstand the force of the waves smashing down from above. They would fail. The water would go into the cargo areas, and all of a sudden the weight of the ship was like completely off, and it would just snap.
Yeah, it's bizarre that that can happen. I mean, for years and years they've seen it on the Great Lakes with freighters disappearing, and you can get a lake wave. But thinking about trying to take something into the open ocean, it really does give us a new appreciation for naval architects.
What they eventually figured out was that they could use nonlinear equations like in quantum theory to explain this, and it does happen in lakes. So they figured out that rogue waves are these nonlinear waves. There might be 100-foot wave and 35-foot seas, and the only way to explain that was with nonlinear equations. And so the same thing can happen in any body of water at any size. So a lot of those sinkings in the Great Lakes were in fact from rogue waves. Like, the famous, I mean, I'm Canadian, so we grew up with is the Edmund Fitzgerald. That was
Yeah.
sunk by a rogue wave.
Wow. Incredible.
I love in your book the way you really dive in to the wave.
Well, that's always my goal. And I call myself I'm literally an immersion journalist. Like I want to get into the water. And when reporting a book like The Wave, one of the big questions I had was, well, how am I going to get out into these waves? And I, at the same time, was also wondering, well, who really knows them? And hearing about these, at the time, it really was 99% men, these guys that were going around the world trying to surf the biggest waves they could find. And you can see one of them in the next slide.
Yeah, I'm trying to go to the next slide, and for some reason I'm having a little freezing problem here, so I'm going to stop sharing and come back to it for just a second. Sorry.
And while everybody else is running, mariners and everybody else is trying everything they can to possibly do to avoid these waves,
There we go.
this group of people is trying desperately to find them, like hunting all over the world for them. And that's a picture of Laird Hamilton, who became my guide into this realm. And Laird was, I guess, crazy enough and also curious enough to see what I would do to take me into these waves. And I trusted him to do it and get me back out again.
Well, he wanted to get out himself.
Yeah. So we went down the face of some of these waves, and I went around the world to see them. And I don't really actually know how to write about something if I'm not experiencing it. And the point would be to take curious readers into this environment too. And hey, let's have an adventure and let's figure out what it's like, and let's tell a story. And we can get scientific information in there. We can, have a great time. But let's go in there and see what it's all about firsthand.
Well,
Yeah.
I know Laird is a little crazy, but so are you.
But all of these guys, one of the sayings that they have that I love is, we're not risk junkies, we're risk analysts. And everybody thinks that they're so nuts, but they're among the most cautious and humble people you'll ever meet, because as we all know, the ocean is really good at conferring humility, and they knew this. You don't look at one of those 80-foot waves and think, I'm in charge here. So it's not exactly what people think when they have the impression of these sort of macho big wave surfers. They're very different.
Yeah.
Susan, I'm grateful to you for introducing me to Laird and to have him explain just the science of breathing.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you are, when every breath counts, and it really does.
I said to Laird one time, how long can you hold your breath? Because if you get held down by one of these waves, the intervals can be quite long, and you're down there. He said, I don't really want to know consciously how long I could hold my breath. I just know that so far, long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, it's about, you just have to really, kind of think about the breath and not panic, which is incredibly difficult if you're kind of in that
To
situation.
train yourself to extend the time between breaths, that we're capable of much more than we give ourselves normally. We just breathe, right? But the ability to infuse your lungs with oxygen, with deep breaths that you consciously take, gives you an edge when you have to be without for a while.
Yeah.
Have you had a situation when you've been diving where you had to sort of grab hold of yourself and think, okay, because it's easy to say when you're in the middle of this underwater explosion, like the only way you're going to get out of it is by relaxing, but it's so counterintuitive. It's really a great metaphor for life. But have you experienced that, Sylvia?
Oh, for sure. The greatest danger, it's not just underwater, it's panic. Whether you're driving a car and you don't panic when you go into a skid, you sort of should go into a Zen moment. And the same is true underwater when the unexpected happens for whatever reason. You're out of air. You weren't supposed to be out of air, but your regulator gets clogged for one reason. And so what do? Do you bolt for the surface? That's
No.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, just say, okay, just shut down for a moment and then
Regroup a bit. Yeah.
regroup.
Regroup.
Better
think.
chance of getting through whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, one of the questions that I had when I started reporting with these surfers was, I mean, they're not even really like surfers. They're more like they're just surfers, what astronauts are to pilots, was what happens when you fall? How do you even survive that? And one of the things that was really incredible to me was that if you don't hit a hard object, like you don't hit the bottom or you hit a rock or something, you can just go with the water. You're not going to have the best time. You have to be like, you do really have to sort of let her drive because you're not going to be able to. But they make it out of those situations surprisingly often without any injuries, although they do get injuries too.
Sure. Yeah. It can
Yeah.
really hard. But you see I've seen some of these videos of dolphins or sea lions or other animals kind of riding these waves. Yeah, and you can just see that they're
having a good time.
They're having a good time, but they're really kind of like literally surfing the waves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. And it really does make a lot of sense to kind of think of yourself as sort of another fellow marine mammal.
Yeah. And our bodies are 72% water, salt water. And so we're part of it, right? And as long as you don't hit an immovable object,
Yeah.
the chances are that you could be okay, even on a terrible fall on a wave like this. And this picture really always scares me because he's not even wearing a flotation vest, which is a safety development that came a little bit later. And this is not layered on the shoulder. This is layered right in the pit of this wave. And I don't know how tall that was, maybe 60 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you figure like he's probably what, at least 6 feet tall.
He's 6'4".
6'4". Oh, even so the wave's worse than that.
And I don't think we're seeing the bottom of the wave there either.
No.
Yeah.
You just measure it in layers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty formidable.
Yeah.
So.
But it's what you said is really interesting too about dolphins. Like in the next book I wrote after the wave, Voices in the Ocean, one of the things I was particularly interested in about dolphins is there's so much here you have this this mammal with a formidable brain, social mammal, and they have all these physiological capabilities and brain capacities that we don't have because they're like tens of millions of years older as a species and have managed to thrive throughout that entire time in the dominant ecosystem on Earth, right? Like, what do they know that we don't know? And one of the really interesting things about their physiology was that they can actually swim faster than physics would seem to be able to explain. There's something that they're doing with their musculature and their skin. They can actually zip through the water faster than we can't create an object that can do that.
Yeah, although we have tried.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
with tuna, of course, they
yeah.
take their tail back and forth, whereas dolphins up and down, dolphins and whales. But in the process, they create these little vortices, little whirlpools that propel them forward. So it is said by the MIT engineers that have studied the motion of bluefin tuna that they actually kept moved through the water with 97% efficiency.
Incredible.
And the best
Incredible.
humans can do is like about half of that
Yeah.
with the best propulsion systems that we've come up with so far. That may have changed, but that's what I think that's about right. We can do
I,
better. We listen.
I remember when I was swimming competitively, really seriously, one of the things they would do is put a harness on you and pull you through the water. Well, you're swimming as fast as you can, but pull you at world record pace so that your skin would get used to the feeling of the friction at that pace. And at a certain point, there's a resistance almost to that. Like there might be a terminal velocity, an individual terminal velocity for us in water until we can learn how to surpass that.
Our skin needs to be more slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of heavier, like a dolphin skin is very kind of turgid,
And tunas have all these mechanisms for streamlining. And
And
speaking
of course, so do sharks with their denticles.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is my favorite. Well, I shouldn't say my only favorite, but one of my favorite animals.
Your favorite fishes.
Yeah, one of my favorite fishes.
They are very, she's going for the books again.
The
And
much maligned great white shark.
yeah, these guys are, well, the topic of the devil's teeth is right off the Farallon Islands, which are right here off the coast of San Francisco. And locally they call them the limousines because they're out there with a fish finder. All of a sudden it says, 10 feet. Goes back to 80 feet, 10 feet, 80 feet. So they're big enough to just kind of cruise through and be all
return the ping.
Yeah, they're big animals.
The mature ones that hang out at the Farallons, the first time I saw one, I was just shocked at how unshark-like it looked. Like they're so wide, they really look almost orca-like.
Yeah.
Different than other sharks, definitely.
Yeah, people love to go out there and try to see them, and they've got a lot of sea lions and things like that for them to eat out there. But increasingly, they're actually like a fairly shy fish. They don't really seek us out by any means, and now they're increasingly becoming targeted by the orcas. So
yeah,
very crazy.
They do seem to be like how do I explain this? And I know you guys have probably experienced the same thing, but white sharks are just, there's a reason they got to be 400 million years old as a class of animals. And they don't just launch themselves at stuff. They are cautious and kind of shy and curious. And I don't think this is necessarily the case with, say, a bull shark or a tiger shark, but if you're in the water with one and you make eye contact with them, they will swim off. They don't like that at all. They want to be the ones that sneak up and yeah.
And they are kind of very ambushy, and I think that's where people get crossways of them, is because they kind of like go down deep, and then they're kind of scanning the surface, kind of looking for something the right shape, and then they come in and they take a taste and they go away. But by then, if they're tasting us, we're kind of weak and flimsy, and so we bleed a lot. Whereas if it's a seal or a sea lion, they might survive it, they might not, or but they don't really just like stay right there. They kind of sneak up like that.
Yeah, and by the time they really launch a full-on attack, they're pretty certain of what they're doing, and it makes sense because being one of the only a handful of warm-blooded shark species, and they're so big that if they started launching themselves, their 2,000-pound bodies up through the water, and they're trying to move with speed and, to make an ambush predation, they would expend more calories than they get from eating a human or a surfboard, or they don't want to do that. They need blubber. They're like a blast furnace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they traverse big areas of the water, and they're not here all the time. They migrate.
we're not on their menu.
No.
I mean,
No.
it's we're not on the menu basically of any sharks. It may be that in some places that either they have nothing much else to eat, or they've become accommodated to the presence of humans, and they are not. They want to just give us a little taste. But when you think how many sharks we consume as compared to how many of us they consume, there's no contest.
Yeah,
Hundreds.
I always say if their point is to eat us, they're not very good at it. And I don't think you survive five global mass extinctions by being bad at what you do, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Are
This
these
is
the devil's teeth? Whoa.
Yeah, so these are the Farallones, the South Farallones, and this is South Farallon Island. And they called the sailors in the 19th century called them the devil's teeth because you can see they just like jut out of the water. I'm sure you guys have seen them in person,
yeah,
but like they jut out of the water like fangs, and they're really distinctive looking. And they're only, 30 miles west of the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's like when you get there, you're on another planet.
yeah.
Birds love them.
And
Oh yeah.
birds, yeah. Um,
Wow.
so I started going out there to write about the scientists that were studying these sharks in pretty unorthodox and really effective ways. And one of the things that happened while I was out there, and this picture kind of arose from it, was that somewhere on the mainland, they had a sea lion rehabilitation.
Mhm.
And so a sea lion that had gotten injured was nursed back to health. And the people that had done that, for some reason that nobody could figure out, decided to release him at the Farallones,
Oh
Oh,
no,
which
what a
cool
terrible
idea.
idea.
Oh,
not the best idea.
oh,
And the people who had rehabilitated the sea lion went all the way out there in a boat and let
Okay.
him loose. And one of them actually ended up taking this picture. And this
what a,
not on purpose. This is a shark named Gouge, and you can see because he got hit by a propeller, and you can see the propeller marks in his head. So yeah, it doesn't take very long for things to get investigated there.
No.
well, and an animal that has been in captive circumstances, it takes a while for them to behave normally.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen with fish. Well-intended scientists trying to return some little damselfish to a coral reef, and they were just they were bewildered, and they showed they just didn't act like a normal damselfish, and it didn't take more than 30 seconds before a grouper came and snapped them up.
Just like popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were confused, they didn't know where they were. And that's very likely the case with this poor little sea lion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they got him at the Farallones, so why they would release him there, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, with friends like that, you don't really need enemies.
No, for sure.
Right. Oh my God. Let's go play in traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me nurse you with your broken leg and then push you off a cliff.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Where are you here?
Well, so to add to your point, one of the animals that you see that real chasm between letting their wild lives play out and then trying to reintroduce them into the wild after they've been captive is in the dolphin world, of course,
Mhm.
in the cetacean world. And um, these are false killer whales, and this picture was taken off Hawaii, and there was one cetacean scientist that I really adored named Robin Baird, who studies all the really rare species of dolphins off the coast of the Big Island, where you can see them pretty close to shore because of the drop off. And I asked him one time, what's your favorite dolphin species? And he said, oh, false killer whales by far. And it turns out that they are even unusually more than most dolphins, really interested in humans. And several divers have had the experience of being in the water off the Big Island. And I think there are 3 or 4 pods of false killer whales. They're pretty endangered because they're so good at snapping fish off long lines. But
Oh,
one of them caught an ahi and swam up to the diver and basically handed him the fish. And it turns out that they have this ritual where they pass the fish around amongst themselves and nobody takes a bite. And Robin said, okay, so why are they doing that? Like, if I give my dog a steak, he doesn't hand it back to me. Like, what's
No.
going on here? And it's like a trust building bonding ritual amongst these cooperative hunters. And they're just like, the more you see false killer whales, the more incredibly, like, you expect them to, they're really communicating strongly. They're amazing animals, but there are so many species of dolphins that are so cool.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, if you were an alien looking for intelligent life on Earth, you'd certainly start in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can make, with a lot of the scientific stuff that I learned while I was writing Voices in the Ocean, that I could make a pretty solid argument that orcas are the most intelligent and evolved creatures on Earth
Yeah.
Maybe
for a lot of different reasons.
you think sperm whales might give them a
And
run?
sperm whales. I haven't spent a lot of time with them yet, but I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you know the scientist Hal Whitehead, who wrote about culture in cetacean societies. He
Oh,
he made a really interesting point, and that is that, we're humans are so fond of saying that we're the only creatures that have morality and ethics and things like that. Well, sperm whales are exhibit A that that's not true, because they could actually they could use their clicking mechanisms and so loudly that it would be like firing a gun at
Hmm.
at anybody who's in the water, their pod or humans or anybody, and they never ever do it. And they know that it works because they sometimes use it for hunting purposes.
mhm. Well, they're smart enough not to destroy the world they live in.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
that was the main
Unlike
thing I
sea
was
predators.
interested in. Who are these creatures? Who are they? Like, not what are they? Sure, let's talk about what they're doing and all their science and all that, but who are they?
Yeah.
Exactly. We should think
Yeah.
of tuna too. And
Yeah.
swordfish.
So yeah, so I spent a lot of time doing immersion journalism with dolphins on the Big Island. And I had by that point spent a lot of time with sharks, but not I and swimming these long distance swims between the islands, but I never saw dolphins. And everybody I knew had seen dolphins all the time. And Laird in particular had seen dolphins all that whenever he was surfing, dolphins would come up to him. And I said, why do you think I always see sharks? I mean, I'm always happy to see them, but and Laird said, Susan, you really have to work on your vibe.
Yeah.
And I think he was right, because the first time I actually got surrounded by dolphins was right after my father died, and I'd just gone for a long swim by myself, which I normally wouldn't do, um, off Maui, and they just surrounded me, and it was
Wow.
so magical that it made me forget how sad I was for several hours.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that they do. I mean,
There's an empathy.
there's an empathy, I've
Yeah,
seen it with the humpback whales, and it really is, it's very moving. Interesting.
there's just so much that we can't explain about the how evolved they are, which really fascinates me. And I mean, some of the stories that I heard, you hear almost like what sound like apocryphal tales of dolphins doing things.
Mhm.
But whenever I came upon a story that I could fact check, that's when I really got excited, because some of these stories are, we honestly can't explain them.
Mhm.
Like dolphins rescuing divers or people who are lost at
Struggling.
sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. But my favorite one was from a scientist named Madalena Berzi, um, who wrote in one of her books that a group of scientists were studying bottlenose dolphins off the coast of LA, and they were following a pod along the coast as the pod was hunting. And they were, it was a marine fog kind of morning, and the dolphins were quite close to shore. And they found some fish, and they started herding them into a sort of a ball so they could hunt. And of course, they've just spent a bunch of energy doing this. You would think that there's no reason for them to suddenly leave, but that's what happened. So the scientists were very interested. One dolphin just took off, went out to sea, and then the rest of them followed. So the scientists followed the dolphins to find out they didn't even feed. Why are they leaving now? And
Yeah.
they actually led the scientists about 3 miles offshore, and again in this fog. And then they then formed a circle. And inside the circle, there was an object, and the scientists got closer and realized it was a girl. And
Wow.
she was floating. She had a plastic bag around her neck. She had her ID in her and a suicide note in the bag. And the dolphins like basically made a circle and pointed like here. And she was alive, but probably just barely.
Barely.
How do this comes from scientists, so they couldn't have seen her? What is that about? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's just incredible.
Yeah.
For one thing, their ability to perceive sound at a
Yeah.
level that is beyond our hearing, especially in the water. Water transmits sound better than
Right.
in air, and that they actually live in a realm where we struggle to understand, to sense what the creatures who live there sense, to even get a shadowy glimpse of what they feel, what they sense, what they taste. Anyway,
Yeah. And when you think about it, John Lilly, the scientist,
Yeah.
yeah, he called the humans babies in the universe. And when you think about it, using vision as a primary sense on a planet where 95% of the biosphere is in the dark 100% of the time in the deep ocean, that's not the best way to navigate. Acoustic senses and frequency is really a superior way to navigate that world, and that's what they do.
just that comment that you made, how many scientists, let alone people generally, put on the balance sheet that most of life on Earth lives in the dark all of the time? All
Yeah,
of it's
yeah.
true because you've experienced it. Liz has experienced it. I have. And intellectually, you can say, yeah, light penetrates only, it depends on where you are. Some cases,
A couple
maybe
100 feet.
3 inches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe really on a great day in the open ocean, you could get a little tiny bit of light beyond 300, even 400, even maybe down to 1,000 meters, a photon or two, but certainly not anything like what we need in order to navigate.
And even on land, it's dark half the time, so
Yeah.
it's really not the
Yes.
best
Yeah.
sense.
And
I mean, I
what is it with
and
us that
yeah, and our
what
brains, I didn't put in the slide of the dolphin brain versus the human brain, but if you look at them side by side, it's so much more elaborated. They have the two lobes like we do, but it's so much older. And
Yeah.
they can do things with it that we can't do, but there are interesting adaptations that we may have to make as a species if we want to last 150 million years, as they have.
correct?
Yeah.
But think of how we are illuminating the planet that should be dark.
Yeah.
Fly across North America. There's some spaces here and there, probably where there are national parks or
Yeah.
water, but it's just and it's only happened in the last 100 years or so.
But yeah, it looks like it's on fire.
It's really has to disrupt much of life on Earth, including ourselves. I think we need the dark. I think we are adjusted to these rhythms of light and dark with, and although most creatures, it's dark, we're just trying to make the whole world light all the time.
Yeah. And I think even in space now, there's just this. My cousin is a pilot, and he's told me a couple of things he's seen from up there. One of them was he came across in the Pacific Ocean what looked like a city, but it was bright red. He sent me a photograph of it, and you couldn't believe how bright it was and how big it was. It looked like a city, but it was you know what it was? It was a fishing fleet,
Fishing
Squid
fleet.
fleets.
massive.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
horrendous.
It was extraordinarily bright and big, and it was just like, what the? And also, he has told me that there's just a tremendous amount of satellite, like Starlink junk up there. I mean, I guess it's not junk, but it is kind of like cluttering the space, and it's all got lights on it.
Yeah.
All this is most of it within the last 50 years, but
Yeah,
certainly century,
Yeah.
yeah.
and changing the nature of nature, and not no confidence this is going to work in our favor, even though the things we've done have been with the intent to make the world better for us.
For us is the key word. I mean, but the ocean bats last, as you
Oh, yeah.
know.
Nature,
I mean,
nature at large.
The
But
laws of nature.
I mean, when people ask, well, is the ocean going to be okay? It's like, yeah, but the question is not, we may not be. we're relying on it to stay this one way. And there is no guarantee that with all the inputs that we've input into the system that it will.
Yeah,
That's true.
very true. From, from light to sound to
Chemicals.
chemicals, all kinds of things.
Heat. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one beautiful animal.
Isn't this
Gorgeous.
magnificent?
Absolutely gorgeous.
Paul Kager from Woods Hole took this picture, and I love it because when I talk about, try to take people on a journey through the deeper parts of the ocean, everybody is used to seeing these fish that are held up as being like, aren't they just monstrous? Well, I just can't believe how beautiful this is. Look at the glittery blue and the photophores, and like there's real magnificence in this, in every bit of it.
Every
And
iota.
of course, it's like, the size, it's 6 inches long but
Not even
everything,
that.
like it's nano crystal teeth.
I know,
It's
right?
just, yeah,
It's jewelry,
Phenomenal.
a mouthful of jewelry.
mouth, just magnificent and so adorable.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
suit of armor
Yeah.
gleaming.
I mean, who made that up? Her creativity is at full flourish in the depths,
Oh, the jellies and
Yeah.
the octopus that don't look like octopus. The squids, and look at this gorgeous thing.
Isn't it beautiful? So I always show this one. And usually when I'm with an audience, I'll say, "Who's heard of an elongated bristlemouth?" And nobody puts up their hand except maybe if there's a marine biologist in the audience. And it's all the more amazing when you think that they're the most abundant vertebrates on Earth, and most people don't even know what they are.
Yeah. If you show, no one, very few people would even recognize this as a bristle-mouth. They just say, "Oh, it's just some kind of toothy fish,"
Yeah, he's got big teeth.
Big teeth.
This couldn't even be a Jeopardy question. Nobody would get it. Like they just are the unsung heroes of the planet, shuttling carbon up and down and every single night in the world's largest animal migration. And they're, again, just magnificently beautiful.
And they're groceries for creatures like the tunas,
Yeah.
seas, and other high seas
Predators.
birds when the creatures come up.
They're just such an integral part of all of it. And the idea that we would fish at those depths. And I mean,
yeah.
I heard this is your famous quote, Sylvia, you're grinding up eagles to feed chickens, they get grounded into meal for fish farming.
Yeah. And oil, fish oil.
Yeah.
And next time you have farmed salmon, think about the source of what those creatures are being fed. Krill from Antarctica, another tragedy.
Well, I mean, I stopped eating seafood a long time ago. And I know have you ever? I don't even think you ever have, but you couldn't.
Because I didn't know. And when I was a kid, the ocean was a different place. And what was made available came locally. What's available to those who consume sea life today very likely has come from the other side of the world, or from the high seas, or from somewhere distant. Like, how far did that tuna come to have your tuna salad in Chicago? It's just
thousands of miles.
Well, and big carbon footprint, not just the animal itself, but what it has taken.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the ship, the spotter plane, the processing, the transportation once it gets to land, the flash freezing process, all of it.
It's a luxury. This is not a necessity. I just, it almost is painful for me to hear statistics such as a billion or 2 billion or 3 billion people, the numbers are all over the place, rely on the ocean for their primary or their whatever source of either protein or animal protein or whatever. But the exaggeration of the marketing that we need to kill wildlife by the ton from the sea, it's just not true. It's a choice, and it's costly. There's so many options for what we can consume deliciously and nutritiously, and yet we kid ourselves thinking, oh, we've got to have ocean life,
Yeah,
seafood.
seafood.
One of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in my life is watching a trawl, not a bottom trawling net, but it was a scientific trawl, but watching a trawl net come up and just dump. It was, I'll never get over it. It was, and to think that this was just a scientific transect thing, it wasn't like a big industrial ship. I can't even imagine the violence and the horror of watching them pull those nets in, those giant nets in.
How
Yeah.
much is not even taken to market, but is killed
Yeah,
nonetheless.
yeah. And then of course the animal life, the chemosynthetic animal life, which is so incredible because I mean, and what was it, 1979? And they found hydrothermal vents, and they were so sure that they weren't going to find any animals there that they didn't even bring biologists. But there they are,
Yeah.
the tube worms.
Yeah. I love all the little T-handled push cores. We built so many of those for, ROVs and submersibles,
Yeah.
or even handheld ones for, shallow water. But it's like one of the most useful little tools in the tool chest for ocean science.
Yeah,
Sample.
and they're pretty too. This was taken at Guaymas Basin in April. I went out to sea with Mandy Joy and a microbiology cruise, and so this is my first Alvin dive. Was actually this picture, and I had never seen tube worms before. I mean, you've seen pictures of them, but it's not the same as looking at them.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's just such a jolt of joy
Yeah,
to be in their presence. And the whole idea of chemosynthesis, we I keep saying thank you, or as a botanist, I used to have a bumper sticker, have you thanked a green plant today? Because it's take a breath, oxygen, where'd it come from? Photosynthesis. And it's true, we should all be thanking green plants, and green phytoplankton in the sea. But there's another way of capturing food from the chemicals in the ocean, and chemosynthesis we don't know really, or don't have a measure yet of how important that is in terms of, let's say, the carbon cycle or the nitrogen cycle or the phosphorus cycle, the basic elements that get passed from one organism to another. But we're all made of stardust, and it all gets put together in various packages. Why should we, with our arrogance, think that the action is just where we are in the illuminated world, when most of the life on Earth lives in the dark? They're not just getting their groceries from the little gentle rain of photosynthesis, although that does account for some of the detritus and organic material that makes its way to the seafloor, now accompanied by a whole lot of plastic and other junk. But chemosynthesis, I suspect, is going to prove to be a really significant piece of the chemical processing that we are just beginning to tune into.
that is so important. And to hear you put it like that is so eloquent. It, just maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but that the whole notion that there might be oxygen created
Oh,
by the
yeah.
manganese nodules on the bottom, like that's just a massive new discovery that probably tracks with that. And it just shows that we're just learning. We're just beginning to learn how this all works. And it's just so, here's a bunch of like crazy hadal zone animals. And until I guess probably the last 5, 6, 7 years was really impossible to get regular peaks into the hadal zone. And Alan Jameson and his group at University of Western Australia with their full ocean depth sub are just every month they're heading to Antarctica right now, coming back with these incredible pictures from, they have also 3 full ocean depth landers. This in the foreground is a hadal snailfish, and we always see them, they're like these, they're this is my favorite fish in the whole ocean, but they found one that it's blue. It's
Yeah.
indigo. Why
And
is this one blue?
yeah.
And these cusk eels in the background, they're also one of my favorite fish because they're so big and all at this depth, like 28,000, 27,000 feet, they don't have any predators. So
No,
they're just having the time of their life down there.
Yeah, they got that blunt nose. They're so adorable.
Can we go
They
back?
are. And this is technically by ratio of brain to body, the stupidest animal on Earth. But I think it's doing something very smart by living at depths where it has no predators, and it's evolved to do exactly that. And in the next slide, I've got a little clip of a video of it. This is
Yeah.
this is him eating. Now, if we weren't there, how would we know this? But he's eating amphipods.
Oh my God.
This is a full head opening up.
Nope.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And that makes perfect sense when you think like you're in the deep ocean and you want to make sure if you got a meal that you're going to keep it.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want it to get away.
Yeah. But so these are all videos and images from Alan Jameson's Hadal explorations. And to me, this is so exciting because even though the Hadal zone in the trenches are only like 2% of the ocean's footprint, they account for 45% of the depth. So this is a realm that we really have a lot to learn, and especially in these subduction zones.
And
And so
what are all those sensors? What do they feel? How do
Yeah.
they?
well, like I mean, the rat tails. This guy, like, I love this picture because it shows his armored head, and this
Yeah.
look at his eyes almost look like the viewports on a sub. Like they're so well adapted.
Yeah.
Well, there is bioluminescence.
Look at these faces.
So these well-developed eyes do respond to light, but it's not light of the sort that we respond to, and no red, or at least if there's red, it would act like an invisibility cloak for any creature that could make red light. Because
It's amazing. Like the strategies and the evolutionary adaptations that have made it possible for them to live in these environments it's just awe-inspiring, really. And this is the reason I love Hadal snailfish so much is because they're so cute. They're
They
the
are.
deepest fish, and they're made of
know
basically
about
jelly.
the deepest that we know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they can't go full ocean depth. So far, there's no fish that can go below 30,000 feet that we've found.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
someday. But I mean, look at their little happy faces, and they don't have any closed cavities because they can't. And they have two mouths. So they eat these amphipods. But if you eat an amphipod and you're made of jelly, it's going to eat its way out of your head. So the second mouth is like a mill, makes
Yeah.
amphipod puree.
You
And I
get
just
like
love
a
it.
lizard and a bird.
Yeah. So you've got like, here you have the most successful predator in the most extreme environment on Earth, and it's a pink gummy bear. And they're
Oh,
just so
well,
beautiful.
They really are gorgeous.
I mean, who created those angel wings? I mean, it's just crazy. It's just I found this great quote from Charles Wadville Thompson, the chief scientist of the Explorer, and he basically said, "Why has nature left so much beauty in a place where no one would ever see it?" And it's like, no, no, no. They all see it. And we can see it too if we're just going to be humble, if we can be humble enough to go down there on the ocean's terms.
Mm-hmm.
it's like made it out of ivory, or no, really like jade.
Yeah.
So,
But this is not, unfortunately, the amphipod that this is an amphipod called Erythenes plasticus that was found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's a new species. And when Alan and his team started looking at it and sequencing it and just really taking a close look at it, they realized that not only did it didn't just have plastic in its digestive tract, which you see in a lot of animals in the ocean now, alas, but the plastic was embedded in a more like a more basic way into the physiology. It was part of the animal.
yeah.
And they couldn't find an example of this particular species that did not have that. So they named it Erythenes plasticus. It's the first plastic organic hybrid creature.
Wow.
And a lot of the plastics at that depth are just nanoparticles. So we don't see them, but they're there.
They consume them and now incorporating them. It's
Like
bizarre.
nanoparticles that we're breathing while we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, I just don't see how that can go on.
No.
We'll be incorporating
Yeah.
into a structure too.
Yeah. Well, it's already like in our blood and
Yeah.
tissues. So it's
Manganese nodules. Go get them.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
There's nothing down there.
nothing down there.
yeah, nothing down there. I was talking to a radio interviewer from Australia the other night, and he said, "So they're just lying there," and I was like, "Not exactly."
That's the myth.
Just lying there waiting for us to come through and to pick them up, and what harm could
But
it possibly do?
Sylvia is, I'm just saying this to the audience, but Sylvia is the main character in my deep sea mining writing in the Underworld, and hence inspired me so much with, you've inspired me so much with your, just the way you can talk about it. And it was incredible to know too that when you became an oceanographer at the beginning of your career, that also coincided with the first attempts to take these. And you were the one who told me that we don't even know how they're made.
No.
Well, the evidence points to microbial action that over eons gradually take the small amounts of these various metals and distill them. The coral reefs take the elements that they need to build their shells out of seawater. And in this case, the bacteria involved in concentric rings, starting with something like a shark's tooth or a little bit of shell. Something organic is at the heart of these nodule, potato-sized, fist-sized lumps, sometimes much bigger. I used to have one that I used as a doorstop. It was big enough, but there, if you slice through it, you can see the gradual accretion of the materials that make up these, and everyone is slightly different from every other one, and they're still growing. They haven't just stopped in place. They're they started somewhere and they're continuing to get larger, and they're home for a whole multitude of creatures.
You see this anemone here.
Octopuses that use them as a nursery to look at this gorgeous anemone.
Isn't it? Yeah. But and all the microbial processes and microbial sort of archive from hundreds of millions of years old is, I mean, people think of the sediments, but I don't know if they always think of them as being so richly alive and such a data bank of genomic creativity.
Correct.
Mhm.
With a biosphere in the background that may need to come into play at some point in the future if the conditions change. But all of those microbial, I mean, heroes that keep the planet habitable for us,
So
they
Susan,
rely on these sediments.
right. I mean, we have this habit, almost everything in nature, to ask what good is it? If we can't figure out kind of a purpose that is marketable, it's underutilized trash. Either we're talking fish or minerals, and here, the deep sea, we've come across this phenomenal, extremely diverse, rich environment. It's like the good old days with rainforests. You look at it and you say, what good is it? Well, there's all the wood, but actually it's better utilized to grow soybeans or cows or something. So let's burn down this miraculous place so that we can make better use of where it sits. I mean, what is this in our minds that we think we've got a better grip on what the value of a natural system, whether it's an individual species like sharks or birds, or a whole ecosystem like the deep sea. I think maybe, I hope we're right at that point, maybe just in time to realize that our highest priority now is to stop converting nature into other
Products.
uses. Already half the land has been converted primarily for agriculture. And that means the other half is all the other things we do. And maybe I think it's now 15% is highly or fully protected as a national park, consciously, proactively protected. In the deep sea, in the ocean generally, it's only about 3%. Got a long way to go. But
Yeah.
we are at that point where I think the nation's stepping up and saying we have to have at least 30% in the
30
next.
by 30 goal. Yeah.
Next
I-
slide.
I mean, imagine if we just did unilateral high seas protection.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
a
I
really
mean, there's resilience enough that we could repair the ocean could repair a lot of the damage if we let it.
Still
yeah.
have 10% of the sharks. They're not
Yeah.
all.
But that's one of the reasons why I think we are so freaked out. I mean, I have cried on stage before talking about deep sea mining. I can barely talk about it without going into a complete meltdown. It
Yeah.
is so insane that I can't even see us doing it. And I honestly think that if we do, we have crossed the Rubicon in some really important way that will
Mhm.
not end well for us. And I mean, that's also given that I hate so many other things that we do in the ocean, but this one is like on a different level.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable.
So much mis and disinformation. And people don't.
Yeah, and it's
You should be
it's
up.
so reckless. I mean, we're talking about the womb of the earth, and I mean, you've said this so many times that it is one of the last relatively intact because there is these nanoplastics and stuff, but that we haven't put our footprint there. And it's so the thing that it really excited me recently was this new science about the nodules themselves creating oxygen, the dark
Yeah.
oxygen.
Dark
So
oxygen.
surprise, surprise, they're actually doing something besides
Yeah.
just lying there. They're creating our oxygen. And so just like everything else, right? There's a top-down system,
And
primary
bottom.
producers, there's a bottom-up system,
Yeah.
oxygen, oxygen,
Yeah.
life, life.
It was really
So
interesting being out there with Andrew Sweetman, who he helped with the big ROV system over at University of
Lulukai.
the Lulukai to go out there and place those landers and so forth for him. And it was this, he
Were you
was
out in the Clarion Clipperton zone?
yeah, we were out
Yeah,
there, scientists.
University of Hawaii.
Yeah,
yeah,
but they've got we built that Lulukai ROV for them. It's one of the deeper water assets in the Pacific,
yeah.
and so it's really a really nice asset to have in the region.
I was talking to some of the people who have been studying the Clarion Clipperton zone, like Craig Smith and Jeff
Yeah,
Drazen, and
yeah,
some of the people that were with the University of Hawaii. And one of the things that was so incredible was to say that they're in this place where there are all these nodules, and they're racing to find out what's there because the proposed mining would destroy this whole. I mean, each mine is 30,000 square miles
yeah. It's like
that we don't even know what's there, but it's not just
no,
this flat. There's seamounts everywhere. And the incredible thing is it's one of the most biodiverse spots they've ever sampled in the deep ocean, which I'm like,
5,000 species when
yeah.
they haven't
and they
really
barely looked.
barely looked.
And they're not even going into the microbial realm. And there is a scientist from England, Andrew Goodday, who did a study, if I can remember the numbers right, took like 400 samples of sediments from these depths, like abyssal depths, like the Clarion Clipperton zone. And the number of DNA variants, they got something like 2 billion DNA sequences out of these 400 small samples of sediment and 100,000 DNA variants. And something like 61% of them were not just new taxa or new microbial species, but like new branches on the tree of life. Like and we're
Astonishing.
just going to go down there and
Rip it apart for
and the
no.
other thing that's heartening is that it's becoming really clear that batteries for EVs and things like that are not going to need cobalt and nickel. Nobody even wants to use cobalt. So I just,
No, it's
uh,
gonna be
yeah, I
Well,
believe this is a winnable battle. And
yeah.
marketing
yeah,
lies.
yeah.
All right, we're almost at the top of the hour, but I'm going to grab two questions quickly. Carolyn is asking, what has been your most surprising encounter in nature? I liked your swimming with the dolphin story and photo.
In where?
In nature, your most surprising encounter.
Well, I had a really, I'm going to go off the top of my head and maybe I'm going to think of something later that is more surprising, but I had an amazing experience off Maui training with my swim team. And actually, there were only three of us. And we were swimming along. We always swim where we can see the bottom, but we were about a mile and a half offshore. It was pretty deep. And we're just wearing our goggles. And I was swimming behind two men, and one of them, they stopped, and we stopped, put up your goggles, what's going on? And the guy goes, "What's that?" And he points to just underneath the surface. And I had been looking down at the bottom, and I had seen this white thing on the bottom that had like a kind of a chunk missing out of it. And I didn't know what it was. And I'm looking down at this thing, and I look up at what he's pointing at, and there is a tiger shark right beneath the surface of the water, maybe like 10 feet from us, and with its dorsal fin right below the surface of the water. So it was right at eye level, and it was mad. And it was in full attack mode. It had its nictitating membranes. It was pectoral fins pulled in. It was like kind of hunched. And I knew, like, the funny thing is I wasn't scared at all. I just kind of dropped in, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I have not seen a tiger shark up close and personal. And they didn't luckily react either. And I remember having this little thought, like, should I swim towards it? Because that would work with a white shark. But I don't think that would have been a good idea, actually. And I didn't do it. And
Good.
so as we were we were just treading water, and I think it was trying to decide what it was going to do. We realized that what was on the bottom was a turtle, and it had bitten this turtle. And I think it was just feeding when we swam right up to it, and it dropped the turtle, and the turtle had landed upside down. So that's why we could only see the white underside of it. And so a couple more swimmers came up behind us, and the shark got kind of less sure of itself, and it backed off and swam towards other swimmers. And somebody got a video of it, like all in its attack posture. But then once there were about 7 of us there, the shark swam below us and just circled around. And I was looking, and I was thinking, wow, like, look at the head shape. It's amazing. Just like totally loving every minute of it. And it swam to the bottom, and it picked up its turtle, and it kind of shook it like a dog. And then it just swam out to sea, like, you're not going to get my turtle. It was amazing. Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
wild.
it was just such a beautiful encounter. I mean, it probably could have ended badly. I do think it's important that there were a group of us there,
Yeah.
but it was interesting, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to get out there, down there.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
You do that, Susan. Bravo.
Oh, it was, nothing, as you know, nothing compares.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit past the top of the hour.
Do one more. Go ahead.
One more? Okay. James is asking, are there known impacts of submersible lights on deep sea ocean fishes?
That's a good question. Do you know you guys would know the answer to that more than me.
Lights, the impact of lights on deep ocean animals. Like if you have a submersible.
Oh, there's been concern. I've heard Mandy Joy, and I've heard others say that you can actually blind these deep sea creatures. That momentarily you can blind
Anybody.
animals on the land with like headlights, deer on the headlight.
Sure.
And I get blinded when somebody flashes, a camera or just a spotlight. But Edie Witter has also commented on the concern about submersibles that go down, all lights blaring. And one of the things that with the new Honu subs that Liz and her team are building, to be able to go completely dark.
That's awesome.
And to be completely quiet. And also to just use red light to make you can see, but most of the creatures in the sea, at least we think, can't see.
A little bit of that invisibility cloak thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great idea. I mean, there's that awesome AUV from Woods Hole, Mesobot, that goes through the Twilight Zone just with red and really quiet, so that it can film all the creature interactions without scaring them off.
Yeah. Yes, there's lots to be done there. So
yeah.
And Edie Witter also using light as a lure.
Yeah.
Think like a deep sea creature. You're looking for groceries. She
follow
has
the light.
figured out how to look like something yummy.
Yeah.
By flashing a light in a certain way at a certain wavelength that appeals to cephalopods that come to check it out.
And the things that like to check out the cephalopods.
It actually makes sense when you think about it, like that an animal like a squid with a very big eye, like the giant squid, I mean, volleyball eye, it's adapted, they think, maybe to be able to trace bioluminescence if a sperm whale is coming motoring towards them. If you have this giant eye, therefore you have a giant pupil, or, and you flash a bright light in it, it would be very disorienting. And because the eye surface is so much bigger too, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think that's why all the big animals generally follow the submersible and you never see them, you know, they're behind you. All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. And before we close today, we'd like to say thank you. Thank you, Susan, for taking this time
Oh,
to,
thanks so much. It was such a pleasure.
thank you, Ocean
Yeah.
Elders. Mostly thank to the entire diving community. We're so grateful to all of you for joining us every time and being part of these conversations. Water connects us all, and we're grateful again. And before we go, we want to remind everyone,
we need to protect the ocean
as if our life depends on it.
because
it does. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again very soon, later this month. And bye for now.